This building was once a school called the Twinsburg Institute. This is a picture of Reverend Samuel Bissell, who founded it. Now, in the very early days, all the children in Twinsburg went to school on the square in a one-room schoolhouse with all the students mixed together. Then in 1828, when Reverend Bissell came to town, they built another school, and Reverend Bissell and his teachers taught there for about 30 years. But in 1867, Reverend Bissell decided that he wanted a bigger school, so he built this one, all by himself. And there used to be another floor upstairs, so that was a big job. Now, some of the students lived in Twinsburg, but many came from far away, and they lived right here in this building, upstairs. Now, if you went to school here, your tuition would be about $1 a week, and that would cover your learning and your room and your board. But you'd have to do chores too, yes. In this school, you could learn everything from math and science to how to play a musical instrument to speaking a foreign language. Wouldn't you like to go to school in a place like that? Now, the Twinsburg Institute was quite famous, actually. In fact, there were many Native Americans who went to school here, too. By the time the school closed, more than 6,000 people had studied here. Some went on to become governors and congressmen and, yes, school teachers. Now, in this room, you could see some things that belong to Twinsburg students over the years. There are uniforms and yearbooks and athletic equipment and even some pictures of the students and teachers themselves. Lots to explore. Now, if you went to school here in the 1800s, your teacher might wear something like this, or like this. Now, come with me to a display of some more Ohio artifacts. Do you see the arrowheads? Before Ohio was settled, many Indian tribes lived here. Can you imagine what it was like in the early days? We were on the very frontier of America. Ohio had been a state for only 14 years. Try to picture Twinsburg with only a few log cabins and some thick forests all around. Oh, and there were wild animals here too. Bears and wolves and porcupines and rattlesnakes. Must have been a very interesting place to live.
Hello, how are you? I'm Dr. Constance Longmire. I'm one of the trustees here at the Twinsburg Historical Society. Are you enjoying yourself so far? Have you learned a lot of information? I see. Thumbs up. Good. Now I'm going to give you some more. So put on your thinking cap. Put it on. Put it on real tight. It's on real tight. Let's go. Let's have some fun. Look at this cabinet here. Can you see these clothes? Get close. Look at their clothes. These are their clothes that they're wearing, that they wore back when they were born and when they were younger. Look at the gowns. Could you wear something like that? You think it's designer? What do you think? Pretty unique, isn't it? Here at the Twinsburg Historical Society, you will see that and many more gems about the Twinsburg area. Let's come up, follow me. Let's go this way. That's a picture of the twins. Have you ever seen them? That's them when they were older. What do you think they're drinking? Coffee? Kool-Aid? I think it's Coca-Cola. That's them. One is Aaron and one is Moses. The Twinsburg Society, we pride ourselves on having so many wonderful things that will give you information about the city of Twinsburg and its surroundings. Right here, follow me a little bit closer. This case is full of unique gems and items. The early 20th century, that's in the 1900s, this is what they wore. You see the hats there? The men wore hats. like that. They're called derbies. Can you say it with me? Derby. They're called derby hats. And these are what the young men wore, the babies, those type of clothes. One of the first settlers was Ethan Allen, and this is information, and this is what they donated to us. His family donated items in this case. And that was from April of 1817. Are you tired yet? No, it's interesting still? Yes. Coming down to that, guess what that is? I bet you can't guess. Does it look like a soup bowl? A soup pot. It does, doesn't it? But it's not. It's called a chamber pot. Yeah, I know. It's something to where when people would come to visit and they needed to use the bathroom, they would use the bathroom in that pot, and it was called a chamber pot. It was before people could flush toilets. Isn't that something? If you go down here, this is really interesting. Look at those black shoes. Look at mine. Similar. Similar. That's what the ladies wore when they went out dancing. They would have that flapper thin dress on, and they would just move their feet like this. Can you move your feet like that? They would do the tap and they would do dancing. And that's what they looked like when they went out dancing. They would wear those outfits like that. Very nice, very chic. Look at the beads in it. Very pretty. I like that. Favorite color, silver. Twinsburg Township, or the town called the Heights, is the home of two former NFL players, Kelly Herndon and Anthony D. White. They played for the NFL, the National Football League. So they are famous people that came from Twinsburg Heights. Also, there's a business owner that's very active in the city of Twinsburg and Twinsburg Township. He makes cartoon books and comic books. His name is Keith Harris. So he also was born and raised in Twinsburg Heights. So Twinsburg has a lot of great gems and awesome people living here. Let's move on to this. These are pianos. We can't touch them. Can any of you play an instrument? Can you play the piano? Guess what? I can't either, but I can play chopsticks on the piano. It's probably the only thing I can play. But these were donated to the Historical Society. We're so glad that they took the time to bring them here. Look at this. This is a nice one. Look at the legs of this one. Is it wide? Look at that. Do you have a piano in your home? I know, they're kind of big if you do. But if you do have one, remember, practice, practice, practice.
Go red, go red! Oh, hi, I was just playing the marble racing game. It's fun to see which marble will make it to the end first. Come on, I'll show you some other fun toys from the past. Kids love to play with dolls, and here at the museum we have lots of different kinds of dolls. Some of these were made of china, porcelain, cloth, leather, sawdust, and even real hair. Would you want a doll made out of sawdust and real human hair? When money was tight, sometimes people would make rag dolls or handkerchief dolls. Handkerchief dolls were good to have in church because they were quiet and little kids could play with them and keep busy. Sometimes a mom would even put a sugar cube on the head of a handkerchief doll for their kid to eat to keep them quiet during church. Do you like ice skating or roller skating? Roller skating has been around for a long time. It was invented in 1735 by John Joseph Merlin. Ice skating has been around even longer. This is an ice skate that you could tie or clip onto your shoes. This is one of the most fun things in our museum. It's a noisemaker for a shivaree. A shivaree was like a surprise party for a couple that just got married. The friends of the couple would make a lot of noise and surprise them, and then they would have a party and talk and laugh and dance late into the night. Would you like to go to a shivaree? I would too. Well, I hope you can come back to our museum and learn more about some fun toys from the past. Bye!
Hello, I'm Bonnie Williams, and I'm here in the first responders area of the museum. We have 3 different parts to this area. We talk about the history of the Twinsburg Police Department, the Fire Department, and the citizens of Twinsburg who served in the military. First, we'll talk about the police department. Now, Twinsburg did not have a police department until 1955. And before that, we had constables to keep law and order in Twinsburg. Our first police chief was Mr. Glenn Osborne, and he came in 1955 and began operating the police department out of his home with his wife Ruth as the dispatcher. We did not have a police station at that point. Now we have Chief Osborne's uniform right here, which I can show you. This is the actual shirt that Chief Osborne wore. Now we'll talk about the fire department. The fire department has been here a little longer. They were founded in 1919, just over 100 years ago. And at that time, they did not have any fire trucks. Their first piece of equipment was a 25-gallon fire extinguisher cart. We have a picture of that right here. This is the cart, and this is one of our old fire stations and our former chief, Dan Semichek. I don't think this cart would do much to put out a big fire. Now, the fire department was all volunteer originally. No one stayed at the fire station, and the firefighters were notified either by phone or later by a pager system, as well as the siren in the middle of town. And firemen would run out of their jobs from the bank or the hardware store or other businesses and head for the fire station. We have a few items in the case from the notification of the firefighters, the old pagers and plectron systems, as well as some other old fire equipment. Now, I would like to point out our first female firefighter in Twinsburg, Betty Tomko, who joined in 1980. Okay, now we're in the military section of this portion of the museum. We have all kinds of items here. They go all the way back to the War of 1812. And this is one of the very oldest items we have. This is a powder horn that was used in the War of 1812. The soldiers would actually carry their gunpowder in these little containers. They had a string so that you could carry it. And we have all kinds of items here that go back through the Civil War and World War I, World War II, the Spanish-American War. There's even a few swords, which are hard to see. And I'll let you look around that for a minute. And up above me, we have all the men from Twinsburg who served in World War I. We had quite a few. And below we have different uniforms. We have ones from World War I, World War II, Vietnam. One of the older ones here is from Mr. Arthur Dunscombe, who was in the ambulance corps in World War I. And over here, this is the only uniform we have from a woman on display. This is worn by Sarah Riley. She was in the Army Medical Corps in World War II. Okay, the last uniform I'm going to show you belonged to Mr. Stan Jewell. This is from World War II. Stan is one of our few living World War II veterans. He's still in the area, and he worked on the USS Cod, which is now in Cleveland. It's set up as a museum. You can tour it. And this is a picture of Stan when he was much younger. And that's all I'm going to show you right now, but if you come into the museum, you can see all of our displays because we have a lot more. Thank you.
don't know where that doctor is. I've been waiting so long. Well, would you like to look around his office with me? Come in here. Most of the stuff in here belonged to Dr. R.B. Chamberlain, who was a doctor and a dentist. Here, let's look in here. Look at these false teeth here. And this bridge. Those went in somebody's mouth. And then all these tools. I don't think I'd want any of that in my mouth. Close that. And then this was his dentist chair. Doesn't look very comfortable, but going to the dentist usually isn't. This is where you would sit and he would clean your teeth, and then that's where you spit. That's called a cuspidor. So you would rinse your mouth and you would spit it in there, and it would go down the drain. So you sit and spit. And then this is new here. This is called a apothecary scale, and it was used by your doctor or the pharmacist to measure medicine, because you didn't want to get too much or too little. They wanted it to be just right, so they would weigh it on the scale. And then this wooden wheelchair, that is just was state of the art back in the olden days, and it looks handmade, and it's the whole body part here is made of wood. That is amazing. And over here we have an old-fashioned telephone. Back in the day, we didn't have cell phones, and we had this wall-mounted telephone, and most houses didn't have one. This is from 1920, so if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to pick up the receiver, and see that crank there? You had to turn that, and that would connect you to an operator, and you would tell her who you wanted to talk to, and she would connect you to that person. So years later, this phone came along, and this was what everybody wanted. It's like you all want a cell phone today. This was the phone. So to make a phone call, you had to lift up the receiver, and you put it to your ear, just like your cell phone, and you had to dial the phone number. So you would have to do this, and in each of those circles, there's a number, and you just dial the phone number like you kind of would today. And then you hang up when you're done. And let's see, oh, over here, this is a calculator, but it's a very old-fashioned calculator. It didn't, it wasn't digital like you all have today, and electronic. This was, you just tapped it, and this would be like your screen where your numbers came up. And then you had to crank it to make it move and to make it add up. Oh, I think I hear the doctor. Better get back over there. Bye.
Hello, and welcome to the kitchen. Many years ago, it took a long time to grow, harvest, and cook the food and take care of your family's clothes. Here are some of the things that are in the kitchen. This is a hand mixer. You turn the crank, it makes the beaters move. It was used for things like beating eggs, making cake batter, or pancakes. Many years ago, children had many chores to do, like collecting eggs, feeding and watering the animals, collecting vegetables from the garden, and making butter. The first step in making butter is to collect the milk from the fresh cows and let the cream settle on top. Then you took the cream and you put it in a butter churn. This butter churn is called a crock. It has a wooden handle. You move the handle up and down many times to make the butter. These are wooden churns. You turn the crank to make the butter. It may have been a very long process and a lot of work, but you got to spread your warm butter on Mom's homemade bread. Irons, long ago, were very heavy. They were made from a metal called cast iron. These are iron. This is an iron with a detachable handle. It has two bottoms. That way you could leave one on the stove to be hot and use the other one. So you always have a hot iron.
One of the activities you can do online is learning about the telegraph. Before there were phones and texting, people sent messages with a telegraph using electricity over a long distance. The telegraph was invented in 1836 by Samuel Morse, Alfred Vail, and Joseph Henry. There was a railroad that went from Cleveland to Canton, and it went through Twinsburg. So there was a telegraph station in Twinsburg to help the railroad operators communicate. So online you'll see a list of the different symbols for the letters. A dot was a short sound, and a dash was a longer sound. It was 3 times as long as a dot. So if you wanted to write an A, it would be a dot and a dash. So it would sound like this. A B is a dash and 3 dots. Between each letter, there was the space of 1 dot. So you could even use this as a secret code with your friends. So online, you'll see one of the things you can translate is SOS. That meant we need help. It doesn't actually stand for anything. It was just easy to do those letters in Morse code. It would sound like this: 3 dots for an S, 3 dashes for an O, and 3 dots for an S. You can also translate hello, your first and last name, and then you can solve this riddle at the bottom. It's written in Morse code, and see if you can find the letters to find the Ohio inventor who helped to improve the telegraph. So here you can see a model of the telegraph station that was in Twinsburg. It was on the corners of Cannon and Depot Roads, and I hope you have fun learning about Morse code. Thanks!
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Freeman Barn. This barn was built in 1870, and it was built by Dr. Freeman, who was the town doctor at the time. He stored his buggies and his horses in here. Throughout the barn we have many tools. This is the workshop. In here we have a lot of the tools that were used to build the city of Twinsburg. Very fortunate to have a lot of these donations here. The workshop itself we used to show how a lot of the old tools were used. As you can see on the walls, many tools that, like I said again, were used to build Twinsburg. Everything was done by hand. There was no power tools. But the craftsmanship was excellent back in the 1800s. Here in the main part of the barn, we have a lot of, again, the tools that were used. Here we have an old well pump that was used back in the 1800s. The whole framework is wooden. We have an old cream separator that was used to separate the milk and get the cream out of. And all along the wall, we have, again, many of the tools. This particular slab of wood was donated to us by Jack and Peggy Higgins. It was on their property, and it started to decay, and so Jack had it cut, and we brought this slab in. The slab weighs approximately 980 pounds, and we had the 5th grade class come in and count the rings, and they came up with 135, I believe, rings, which is how old the tree was. Each one of the numbers is on a list here, and they will tell you, like in number 16 on this board. When that tree was number 16 there, that's when the old school across the street was built. We have a lot of memorabilia that we saved from the old school, and it was taken down. A lot of the auditorium chairs. We have handles from the old doors. The 2 main brass plates that show the Board of Education in 1921, and then again when the addition to the school was built. We have, again, also, and these are used when we have the old time fair to show how corn was shelled. You put the ear of corn in here, turn the crank, corn comes out the bottom, and then you have your corn for your chickens and your other livestock. This particular tool right here was set on top of a log, a beam, and this was used to cut the grooves to make the tongue and groove, what they call tongue and groove, for the barns, and it still works. And this particular piece of machinery was used after you got your corn off the stalks. You brought your corn stalks in here, and there's a blade that cut the corn stalks into silage, and that would be used also for feed for the animals. Corn stalk in, chop them down. Keep your fingers out. Another old corn sheller that we have here. This was about 1800. We have 4 of the shellers. One that we actually use for demonstrations. And back into the back here, we also have, and the whole barn is just many tools. And these were cider presses to make apple cider from the apples. You put the apples in there and turn the crank and squash the apples and got the cider out of the apples. And then this is a tin shop. And these tools that are in the tin shop were donated by the late George Richner. He had a tin shop actually behind the old Richner Hardware, which is now Twila's. But all these tools were used to make all kinds of things out of tin.
In this room, people practice an art that is as old as America itself, quilting. Every week, quilters come to this room to make quilts out of little pieces of cloth that are then sewn together into fancy patterns. People have done this for hundreds of years. Now, on this wall is their latest finished product. Isn't it beautiful? That will be raffled off at the end of the year, and you can buy tickets. Maybe you'd have a chance to win it. I hope you enjoyed your tour of the Twinsburg Historical Society Museum. Please come back again when you can stay longer and get a really good look at things. The museum is open the last Sunday of every month from 2 until 5 p.m. There'll be people here to answer your questions. Oh, and bring your parents. Goodbye.